So, Lone Rider here, and I wanted to talk about my Raleigh Misceo. This is essentially a hybrid bike, but it's not a hybrid in the normal sense. First off, why make a review of this particular this particular bike? Well, when you do a search on Raleigh Misceo, you get a lot of what's called e-bikes, bikes that have been modified or manufactured to have an electric pedal assist. And well, long and short of it is, this isn't one of those. This is a normal freaking bike. I have very ambivalent feelings about putting motors on bikes. If all it does is assist the pedaling, then essentially, in terms of function, it's no different than a series of advanced gear ratios. It just makes it easier for you to pedal the bike in that sense. If it allows the bike to go when you're not pedaling, then essentially what you have is a motorized vehicle at that point. One of the advantages, of course, of bikes is that they're subject to much less regulation. They're a lot more maneuverable. They're smaller. They're lighter than motorized vehicles, generally speaking. When you put a motor on it that essentially makes it a motorized vehicle, i.e. not just a pedal assist, but an actual electric motor, what you essentially have is an unlicensed motorbike. And yes, generally speaking, it's not the same thing as a Harley Davidson or even a moped, but what you risk doing is you're blurring the lines between bicycle and motorized vehicle at that point. And a lot of the advantages the bicycle has are due to the fact that it's not motorized, both in terms of function. It's easier to work on, it's lighter, but also in terms of regulation. And so, I understand if somebody, for example, is injured or, they have a long way to go, they want to use their bike for commuting and they don't want to be all sweaty when they get there. A pedal assist can be useful, and I've never owned one and I probably never will, but I'm not entirely against them per se. Where the bike actually will go just by pressing a throttle, and it's not a pedal assist, but actually a motorized bicycle. I am against them because they blur in people's mind what is the difference between a bicycle and a motorized vehicle, and they make it that much harder for regular cyclists to continue to exist by shifting that line, by moving that definition. This is especially true since the people on actual motorized bicycles a lot of times self-identify as bicyclists, even though they're really using a motorized vehicle at that point. Anyway, enough on that. I wanted to talk about this in particular because there doesn't seem to be all that much out there about it. Because, again, when you do a Google search or any other kind of search for Raleigh Misceo bicycle, what you get are these electric assist bikes for some reason. I guess it's a favorite platform for modification, and that doesn't really help people who are looking for information about this, which is a normal bicycle. So what you have here is essentially a form of hybrid bicycle. Now, hybrids traditionally have been bicycles that blend categories of road bike and mountain bike. And in that, you can see that here. This says 700 rims, but it has slightly wider tires. It has flat bars, mountain bike type controls, etc. But where most hybrids kind of fall flat for a lot of riders is they're not very versatile. They usually have a very so-called comfort-oriented ride position where you're sitting very upright. A lot of times it's not really all that practical to take them on longer rides because they can't easily be made to do it. You can pretty much do anything with any bike within reason, but it's not designed for it. It's not optimized for it. It's not very comfortable, ironically, to do that. Generally speaking, a lot of hybrids are designed for just cruising around at a slow pace. If you try riding one fast or briskly or over a lot of terrain, varying terrain, you're going to find that they aren't suited for it very much, which is a shame because there is a potential within the hybrid category for a bicycle that appeals to avid cyclists. I have a lot of road bikes. I have a couple mountain bikes, and I've got some fixed gears. But this is one of my favorite bikes for just all-around general riding. It can do longer road rides. It can do some off-roading, both dirt and gravel roads as well as actual single track. It can, be used to commuter, run errands, or whatever you want to do with it. Um, it's a lot more versatile than your normal hybrid, and also obviously than your normal mountain bike or road bike. Um, so what this is essentially is uh, a hybrid that this would be called a performance hybrid, generally speaking. The difference is most performance hybrids lean more towards the road half of the equation. They typically have integrated headsets, carbon forks, more advanced gearing, and fairly narrow tires. They're basically flat bar road bikes. This is a performance hybrid, but in the other direction. Essentially, it's a flat bar cyclocross bike with a slightly longer wheelbase. And what I mean by that is this is a performance hybrid, but instead of going in the direction of more road-like features, it goes in the direction of more off-road type features. So you'll notice it has disc brakes, mechanical discs. You've got a triple in the front and 8 gears in the back. You've got an aluminum frame, solid fork, and flat bar with bar ends. I love bar ends. I swear by bar ends. They're very popular with me on many of my bikes. This didn't come in this condition, though. This came with a different set of cranks and a different set of bars, and obviously no bar ends. I put my own cranks on there because the original cranks were really, really heavy. They were also set up such that you couldn't change the gears. So I like to tweak the gearing on my bikes to suit what I'm going to be doing with the bike itself. This because I wanted it to be usable as basically a flat bar road bike, but also to do some, light off-roading or dirt roads or whatever if necessary. I wanted to have a combination of both types of gears. So I've got a real small granny gear. I've got a mountain bike middle gear, and I've got I think a 44 or something on the outside. I also have my own pedals. These are they're compatible with SPD cleats on one side, and on the other side they're just platforms. So that's that. Now the bars, again, I changed this up myself. I put on a flat bar, I put on bar ends, and of course Orby grips. Swear by these. Now this thing is actually now come into its own. Like I said, when you get one, it's going to come with crappy cranks. It's going to come with essentially low-rise bars, not a flat bar, and no bar ends. But by tweaking this, I've kind of made it a little more suited to what it's actually intended to do, which is sort of an all-around everything bike. This is like the Swiss Army knife of bikes. It's got something for everything. But like I said, it does lend more towards the off-roading side of it. It excels on gravel and dirt roads. I have taken it on actual single track, nothing too gnarly, no jumps or drops or anything, but I did take it on actual single track, and yes, it was a little harsh because although the tires are bigger than normal road tires, they're not as big as normal mountain bike tires in terms of width. But it managed it fine. It was a little harsh for me, but the bike handled it fine. And the stock tires, ironically, were not too bad for it. You'll notice these aren't knobby tires at all. They have tread, but they're not knobby in a traditional off-road sense. But they managed to work fine over packed dirt. So there you go. Now I've taken this also on road rides. It's kind of great if you don't know what you're going to be doing with a bike. If you're going to be going out for an area where I'm going to be riding on the street, but I also know there's a lot of dirt roads and paths or even trails that I'm going to cut through. Well, then it's great for that. It's also great for running errands around town. You never know when you're going to have to hop a curb to dodge a careless driver, or maybe find yourself cutting down an alleyway or something that might not be paved. So the stouter rims and the bigger tires help in that regard. The ride position is sort of akin to mountain bikes of yesteryear in terms of you have a flat bar and you have these bar ends. The bar ends give variety in hand positions so your hands don't get tired. They're also good for climbing. This, by the way, is the proper position for your bar ends. They should be pointed forwards, maybe slightly angled, but forwards. If they're pointed up, like a giant middle finger aimed in the face of ergonomics, your bar ends are improperly installed. Your bike needs help. These particular bar ends came off my Cannondale Killer V. which I outfitted with some stubby bars that I had cut and kind of converted. This one's a little bent, so I'm going to have to replace these at some point, but you might even be able to see the Coda logo on there. So those were from the Cannondale. And like I said, I've taken this on single track. I've used it around town a lot. Actually, it would probably make a good commuter. You've got mounts for fenders as well as racks, rack mounts in the front halfway up the fork here. And you've got mounts on the back. And again, you could put a rack as well as a fender. So if somebody wanted to outfit this as a commuting bike, it would certainly be suited to it. And then you have the fact that it's got these disc brakes. Well, disc brakes aren't really useful on road bikes. But if you're going to be commuting, if you're going to have a lot of weight on your bike, or if you're going to have wider tires like this, they do allow clearance. With rim brakes, you might not be able to fit these tires in and out of the bike without deflating them. With disc brakes, it's fine for that. And if you're going to be riding in the rain or other conditions where the rims might get wet or dirty, well, disc brakes don't suffer stopping power in that event, stopping power loss. So, this would be sort of a good commuter bike, a good errand bike. A good sort of all-around everything bike. If you could only have one, right? It's never going to be as fast as a actual road bike, but you can get up to going a pretty good clip on this thing. And with the full complement of gears, 3 in the front, 8 in the back, you're going to be going easily over various terrain. Now you can change the gearing. Obviously, I had to replace the cranks in order to do that, but you can do that. The gearing in the back, 8 gears is kind of lackluster these days. Most people have more than that. Most people have 9 or 10. But this is the entry-level model for the Raleigh Misceo. They had several. The second one had a little bit better cranks. I believe it had 9-speed, although I'm not sure. And it did have hydraulic disc brakes. Now, one of the reasons I didn't want the second model, the next model up, was because it had hydraulic disc brakes. Hydraulic disc brakes are wonderful in terms of performance. They feel great. They've got great modulation. They're just so amazing to use. But they're a pain in the arse to work on. Everybody I know who's ever had to work on hydraulic disc brakes, including local bike shop mechanics and owners, hate them with a passion. So, mechanical discs, if you're actually going to ride the bike a lot and use it, and it's your own bike, and so you're probably going to want to work on it as much as you can without having to take it into a shop, I would go with mechanical discs if you can get it. Mechanical discs nowadays also are a lot better than they used to be. It's not going to feel the same as hydraulics, but as far as performance, you're not going to notice a problem. So, this has kind of like everything that the next model up would have had, except, I had to improve the cranks myself. As far as the disc brakes are concerned, the next model had hydraulics, but I don't really like hydraulics all that much in terms of having to work on them. I have one bike which has hydraulic brakes on it, my Coda Dog, and it just happened to come with those. Now I love them, they feel really good, but when they eventually start to develop a problem sooner or later, am I going to replace them with other hydraulics? Probably not. I'm probably going to replace them with mechanical discs for this reason. So what you're left with is a really cool, really versatile, really functional bike. And like I said, this is the Raleigh Misceo 2.0. Now this bike is several years old at this point, and I'm not entirely sure if they're still making this model. But this type of bike is something that, I think the bike industry needs to do more of. It's very versatile, it's very useful, it's just fun. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of people, when they hear the word hybrid, if they're an avid cyclist, they get turned off to it because they know what hybrid usually means. It's like a beach cruiser with gears, right? It's for old people putting around on the boardwalk. Nobody who really rides thinks that those kind of bikes are all that useful outside of the particular setting for which they were designed. But this type of hybrid, it really does have a lot of options, a lot of things you can do with it. And, I'm going to be honest, I wish the bike industry would make more bikes like this. As a starter bike, they're great. When I got into bikes, my first store-bought bike was a rigid mountain bike. And ironically, except for the wheel, the wheel diameter, it was essentially the same thing as this, except made out of steel. It had a flat bar ends, uh, fairly wide gearing, and you could pretty much do anything with it. And until I got my hands on a road bike, that was, I mean, I rode that on the street, I rode that in the woods, I rode it everywhere. And, for a first bike for somebody, I got this after I'd been into cycling for a while and had a lot of bikes. I just got this because it was a neat, sort of all-rounder bike. But if somebody's really looking at their first bike and they haven't really made up their mind, do I want to, bike just for riding around and running errands? Do I want a dedicated road bike? Do I want a mountain bike? This kind of offers you the best of both worlds. You can do road rides on it. You can ride it around town in an urban setting, do errands, whatever. You can do light off-roading with it. The limit really isn't the bike anymore. It's just what you're comfortable doing with it. Whereas a lot of bike designs really are very specific now, and they're designed almost to make it difficult to use it for anything outside that field. For example, your modern typical hybrid is just this sit up, you know, balloon tired comfort bike, basically a beach cruiser with gears. Try standing on the pedals to sprint through traffic in one of those, and it's not going to be a fun experience. Try standing on the pedals to go uphill, it's not going to be a fun experience. Try, doing a lot of things with it, it's not going to be a fun experience. Same thing with your typical road bike. Road bike tires are becoming a little bit wider, and you're seeing categories like gravel road bike that are being created specifically because regular road bikes have become very limiting and very narrowly focused. That makes them incredibly great in a pace line, but it doesn't make them really good if you want to try going down that dirt road that you always pass by and you've never seen what's at the other end of it. So something like this, I honestly think they should be making more of. And really, when I'm hanging out at the local bike shop and I see people come in and say, "Oh, I maybe shouldn't get in a bike," either because they haven't been riding in a while and they want to get back into it, or because they're looking to try it out. I never hear anybody say, "I want to be backed into a corner. I want to buy a bike that can only do one thing." What I 9 times out of 10 hear is people saying things like, "I want options. I don't know what I want to do with cycling yet. I want to, try everything." And a bike like this allows you to do that. So, and even if afterwards you decide, "Hey, I want to lean more towards mountain biking and I want to go out and buy a, dedicated off-road bike, or I want to try, hardcore road riding, and so hook me up with a bike that's got drop bars and skinny tires." At the end of the day, if you keep this, it'll always be good for something, right? As a backup bike, as a bike to ride maybe in foul weather, as a bike for, doing errands or even light off-roading, right? I mean, if you're mostly a road biker, but, you start off with this, then you get yourself a road bike, you can always use this as a bike for light off-roading. The tires, it's going to be a question of tire clearance. I tried to put 29er tires on this, and they worked fine for the front. On the back, it did hit the chainstays. But you could use knobbier tires, slightly wider tires, cyclocross tires, etc. Like I said, this bike is essentially a flat-barred cyclocross bike with a longer wheelbase. So definitely something that people should try out. And again, I'm not sure if Raleigh still makes this model, but I wanted to put something up about this bike because I couldn't find anything about it really. I did a search, and everything that came up when I typed in Raleigh Misceo was about these bikes with electric things on them. And that's not what most cyclists are interested in. Most cyclists are interested in a bike like this that you have to pedal. So, here it is, my take on the Raleigh Misceo. And essentially, with a few modifications to change out junk stock parts like the cranks, you're looking at a really good, versatile bike that can pretty much handle anything you throw at it. Whether you want a bike for riding through downtown, doing errands or commuting, whether you want a bike that's suitable, sort of like a flat bar touring bike that can handle some dirt roads or even single track trails, or whether you're looking at something that you just want options. And well, this gives you options, right? This gives you options. As that guy said in Back to the Future at the end of the movie, roads, where we're going, you don't need roads. And This does handle road riding with a plumb, but it also handles some off-roading, and that's a beautiful thing. So Raleigh Misceo 2.0, my take on it. This is definitely a sort of do everything bike, and it's one that executes the concept well. Like I said, it's a bike that allows a little more aggressive ride position, not this sort of sit up and beg comfort bike stuff that's normally associated with hybrids. The ride position essentially is like a hardtail rigid fork mountain bike, except it's got 700 reps. That's basically what this is. And given how many of those bikes, when they first appeared on the market in the late 80s, early 90s, were actually used both on and off road for a variety of tasks, I think they've definitely hit something with this concept. So, you might want to try one of these if you want a bike that can handle everything you throw at it. And if you're new to cycling and you're looking around, well, what should my first bike be? Well, something like this is definitely something to consider. So, on Rider out.